Let's talk about how we can optimize our brains. What is this thing that we're calling optimizing the brain? Everybody's different, but there are some common features of how we are all put together at the level of the nervous system and body that direct us toward particular practices, particular routines that can be especially powerful for neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is this incredible feature of our nervous system that allows it to change itself, even in ways that we consciously decide. Now, that's an incredible property. There are a certain number of people that are pretty good where they're at and they don't want to change, and that's terrific. And I tip my hat to them, and I think that's wonderful. If ever they decide that they want to leverage these plasticity mechanisms, they can at any stage throughout the lifespan. The goal is to figure out how to access plasticity and then to direct that plasticity toward particular goals or changes that you would like to achieve. The trigger for plasticity and learning occurs during high focus, high alertness states. We have this system of neurons in our brain and body that's just incredible that wake us up and make us alert. And when we're not accessing that system well, we cannot access plasticity. We cannot optimize our brain. Your sleep and your wakefulness are the product of kind of the average of a number of different behaviors. That the period that we call sleep and the period we call wakefulness are tethered to one another. What we do in the waking state determines when we fall asleep, how quickly we fall asleep, whether or not we stay asleep, and how we feel when we wake up the next day. There are a few other things that turn out to be strong parameters for success in this domain. Positive anticipation about the next day events actually is a powerful metric for creating quality sleep, even if the sleep is very reduced. But in sleep, we are only in relation to things that are happening within our brain and body. Outside sensory experience, in most cases, can't really impact us. And yet sleep is this tremendously important period of life because it resets our ability to be focused, alert, and emotionally stable in the wakeful period. So neuroplasticity will allow me to optimize my wakefulness, but I have to do something in order to access it. In its optimal range, adrenaline really provides a heightened sense of focus and the ability to encode, meaning bring in and retain, remember information. If we cannot sleep well and we can't rest well, we will not access plasticity and rewire our brain because that's when the actual configuration between the connections occurs. It's simply a matter of plugging the correct elements into the correct boxes. Here's a more or less a rule about how the brain functions vis-a-vis focus, learning, and creativity. Most people tend to wake up sometime around when the sun rises. Maybe not right at sunrise, but within an hour or two or maybe 3 of sunrise. Mid-morning is when many people tend to achieve their peak in alertness and focus. Generally, states of high alertness, when we're very, very alert, are great for strategy implementation. When we already know how to do something, you already have the strategy and you just want to implement the strategy. Sometimes the hardest and most critical tasks are tasks that require creativity. Creativity and tasks related to it oftentimes come to us best, or the brain is best at achieving those, when we're in states of calm or even slightly drowsy. The brain is going through these 90-minute so-called ultradian cycles throughout the entire day and night. Every 90 minutes, we shift over from being very alert to being less alert and then back to alert again. So the goal is to get into what I call the tunnel, to really get into a tunnel of quality work. Because as you all know, the moment you sit down to do some serious work and you flip off the internet, all of a sudden it's as if the phone has a voice. It starts calling you. It's almost as if the restroom has a voice. But we all are familiar with the fact that if we are focused on something, all that just kind of melts away. I'm creating this space. I'm funneling my brain into a state rather than allowing whatever events and contexts on social media and elsewhere might be occurring in the world that would yank me out of what for me is my purpose. The brain loves that state, but it's very hard for many of us to access. So that means no checking the markets, no checking social media, no checking the news, no checking email, none of that. You'd be amazed how much you can get done in 90 minutes if you are focused. A couple of things for optimizing workspace that are grounded in neuroscience and physiology. Try and position your screen or your tablet, whatever device you happen to be working on, at least at eye level, and ideally slightly higher. If you think about it, most people are not doing this. Most people are looking down at their computer or tablet, and when our eyes are directed upward, it creates a state of heightened alertness. And this has a relationship to the brainstem neurons that create alertness and their control over the muscles of the eye and, believe it or not, the eyelids. So body posture and whether or not you're upright or reclining will impact your levels of alertness in the predictable ways. You will be amazed at the tremendous number of positive effects that can come from that. Almost everybody experiences some sort of dip in energy in the late afternoon, or what would correlate to their temperature peak. And that's a good time of day to get either a 90-minute or less nap. I think a 20-minute nap is pretty fantastic, and they can be very restorative for cognitive and motor function. Attention is something that is absolutely under your control, in particular when you're rested. And that's because your nervous system basically wired up to be able to do most things easily without much metabolic demand, without consuming much energy. But the moment you try and do something very specific, you're going to feel a sort of mental friction. If you want to understand neural plasticity, you want to understand how to shape your behavior, how to shape your thinking, how to change how you're able to perform in any context. When you do something deliberately, you pay attention, you are bringing your perception to an analysis of three things: duration, how long something is going to take or should be done; path, what you should be doing; and outcome, if you do something for a given length of time, what's going to happen. It's what I call DPO, duration, path, outcome, type of deliberate function in your brain and nervous system. When you engage in this duration, path, and outcome type of thinking or behavior or way of being, you start to recruit these neuromodulators that are released from particular areas of your brain, and also, it turns out, from your body, and they start cueing to your nervous system, something's different now about what I'm doing. You're not just paying attention to what's happening, you're directing your thought process. And a lot of people don't understand, or at least appreciate, that the thought patterns and the neural circuits thoughts can actually be controlled in this deliberate way. Brain areas involved in attention, brain areas involved in focus and cognition and memory, those are engaged to a greater degree when there is low levels of white noise playing in the background. It turns out that white noise, which is essentially all frequencies of sound, mixed up kind of randomly, there's no structure to it, turned on at a low volume, not with headphones most of the time, puts the brain into a state that's optimal for learning and workflow. Some people can tolerate their own noise within their head much better than others. Other people find that having some background noise helps cancel that out. When you are very alert, The best situation for learning is going to be silence. It's going to be complete quiet. Eliminating background noise and really just trying to get silence is going to be best for learning and for implementation of things we already know how to do, for any kind of focused linear task. So as a rule of thumb, if you're feeling too keyed up, then silence and quiet is going to be helpful. Some people are just naturally more calm. They're pretty mellow. They're kind of clear, calm, and focused all of the time. And those people actually are going to be less flappable. They're not going to be yanked around by background noise, or they're not going to be around, bothered from their learning or from their studying by a clanging of a pot from somebody in the kitchen. Some people are just more go, 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 go. It's just the way that we're wired. And so you have to know where you are and what particular goals you're trying to pursue.